Cameras correctly. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Pete Mohrbacher. I'm a digital artist. I do art the old-fashioned way with a Wacom tablet, which I find funny because it used to be the newfangled way, and now it's the old-fashioned way. Who knows? Soon using an AI to generate with the text prompt is going to be the old-fashioned way, and there's going to be some new way to do everything. I have been doing these studies ever since I started them originally here on this stream, and I've been having a blast learning to do it. I've had some really good ones recently. Oh, here's me attempting to get all my Photoshop files right in the right place. Um, that's good ones recently. This guy came out great, and then I immediately felt like I had a really good one. And then I had a couple more good ones after that, and I was like, "Oh, I think I've kind of mastered all this." And then I had a few that I really struggled with in a row. And then last week, I felt like last week's here on the stream came out very nicely. I was very happy with this. And let's see. So last week on Thursday, and then I did one on Friday, came out bad. And then I didn't do any over the weekend for one of the first times. And I did one on Monday that I was also very happy with. So it's like it's become this very up and down thing. And overall, though, I feel like I'm able to capture something that feels like realistic in a simplified way that I wasn't able to do back here in these very early studies. And I haven't, people keep asking me, like, what do you want to get out of these? What is the intended purpose of making these studies? And I know that I'm getting better at something, and I question whether or not I'm getting better at studying or if I'm getting better at some sort of larger holistic art skill, or maybe some discrete specific art skills that are adding up to a more holistic trend of being better at art or whatever. And it's really, really hard for me to put my finger on. But it was underscored again today by the fact that I had a fan DM me, and the fan said, I was looking for one of your old YouTube videos and I can't find it anymore. And I really wanted to watch it again. I always like to go back and rewatch it. I assume under some amount of influence because I was like, oh, he wants to watch a video of a guy painting with some music in the background. This has to, like, I don't know where this fits into another person's life. I'm not even sure who this was for, but I went and I dug it up and I relisted the video, and I was like, it was an interesting moment. I was looking at a time capsule of my painting from 15 years ago. So that was really great. And now I'm kind of happy that I'm recording quite a bit about this process because now I'm creating another time capsule that will be fascinating for me 15 years in the future. And watching myself paint from, let's see if I can find, let me see if I can pull this up. I can show rather than tell just a little bit. We'll watch just a clip together. I'll show you what I mean. I rebranded my old channel and now it's called Peter Mohrbacher Classic because I'm making some new videos and stuff. And it's got some very early tutorials that are all recorded in like 360p, which is awesome. And I have this is the thing I was watching. And what struck me about it was how different my painting mark making is. I mean, obviously, like I've grown a lot in the last 15 years or whatever. But it was interesting to me the way in which my priorities were different and like the order I was doing everything was different. And there's not like a specific skill that I can point to and say that I'm better at X, Y, or Z skills. There's definitely process stuff. I can look at it and say, well, I would definitely block out the larger forms before going into details. And I would definitely start in black and white and add color later. But there's not like there's a general quality of being more confident and capable as a painter that is not specifically one skill or another. It's like it's this generalized holistic like being better at working with the paint. And I don't know how one perfectly describes that. There's probably some academic thought on this. Um, but I don't have it. I have access to the growth. I have access to the recognition of that growth, but I don't necessarily have access to the description of the ways I'm growing in a purely academic sense. And so now I'm left kind of thinking, well, it's interesting how much has changed and how much has stayed the same. But I don't feel like I'm any clear on the question of what am I growing when I study? And what is the purpose of it and what am I growing towards? Like the hope is that I'm growing towards a sense of like I'm growing towards being better at art for whatever that means. And I'm hoping that I'm growing towards being more confident and capable as an artist. I don't know if those are even different things. There's these very discrete separate skills that art seems to manifest in. And I don't know if they can all be quantified as like stats, like in an RPG. You say, well, I'm putting all my points into spatial awareness, whatever. I'm putting all of my points into dexterity. It's just like we don't get that level of control our over our own abilities. And we can train with like physical training. I've been in the gym a little bit. You can target a muscle and you can say, well, I'm stronger at this, or I'm better balanced, I have a better balance, on one foot, or I'm stronger in my bicep or whatever. And you can say that like I was able to lift more weight, or I was able to hold a grip for longer, or whatever. It's all easy to measure. We love things that are very measurable. But the closest thing that we get to measure when it comes to the study is like the newer studies look better than the older studies to some people. There's probably some people who would look at some of these earlier ones and say, well, I like that better, which is really frustrating. We always get this experience of someone will look at your art and you'll say, check out how much I've improved. Isn't that crazy? And they'll go, oh, I like the old one. It's so subjective and it's so like difficult to pin down that we don't get to have these very measurable kinds of like um, statistics to gauge it on, which makes the whole thing very difficult. I do honestly wonder, since we are on an AI server right now, I think some of my new version. Okay, so all the changing of Photoshop versions, I may have slightly altered the hotkeys. There we go. That when you are trying to have a machine recreate something, you definitely need to have a more academic understanding of what you're going after. You need to be able to put values on things. Style level is at 1000 as opposed to 50, and those produce different results, which we can quantify and look at, measure. Um, that's very interesting because, one of the things that has been true about art for a long time is that it is very, very difficult to measure. But I can tell you from a first person perspective, my experience in attempting to grow as an artist through actively studying just about every day, certainly most weekdays, I can feel the growth. I feel stronger. I feel more confident and capable. I feel better about the work that I'm producing. And I think most of the people that see it notice the growth as well. So it does feel as though real growth is happening, but it's unclear about what dimension that growth is occurring on and how to label that growth. You could say you're better at art, worse at art, whatever. One of the reasons I don't typically like to measure things that way is because we don't like, there is no absolute dimension of like better and worse art. There never has been. So when we want to grow as artists, we can want to say that we got better, but because there is no better or worse, it's just a stand-in for this more complicated, more difficult to measure idea of like I have better control over my values, or I have a better understanding over human anatomy. We can quantify it in some ways, which is good because we crave that kind of quantification of what we're experiencing. So I'm over here, I'm working, I'm putting in work, I'm learning, I feel better, I feel capable. It's something is building, something is growing. I can feel the growth. I can feel it, you know, I can feel my ability compounding. But what do we with that? But then when somebody asks me like, in what way? What do you want out of this? I just go, just want to be better at art. Like it evades the description, and not because I think it's undescribable, but because I think that the language necessary to describe it is challenging. And so I almost wonder if maybe one of my challenges for this whole pursuit should be to better understand the academic knowledge of what the ways to speak about that growth. I mean, but I am left wondering to what end, because I've watched a lot of YouTube videos recently for research, and I'm finding that there are some artists who have done a very good job building a vocabulary for how to describe the ways in which they're learning and the ways in which they're teaching. That sort of thing, that this academic descriptions of like, what are they trying to do and why? And I I'm left like shaking my head a little bit at these pursuits because like I managed to get to what they're describing without ever learning any of that. And so I know for a fact it's possible for somebody else to get a really strong handle on art and to learn all these skills without ever intellectualizing it and building a vocabulary around the ways in which, this stuff is described. You can simply learn it intuitively. And like, you have to learn it intuitively. There's no way of learning all this on a purely academic level without practice, without actually going in and doing it and building a practice of it. I mean, that's at the end of the day, like that's what I'm doing here, is putting in the hours. I'm putting in this mileage on these practices, on these studies, in an effort to have a strong intuitive understanding of these principles, not a purely clinical academic understanding of them. And so a more academic understanding would help me describe what I'm making, but it wouldn't necessarily help me make what I'm making. It may be complementary. I would be willing to concede it's potentially complementary, but it's definitely not a prerequisite. I don't think that you need to learn all of the nomenclature and all of the names of the techniques and the types of things that add up to an art education in order for you to become educated in art. What I think you need is, I think you just need to make a lot of art. And I think that a lot of the descriptions of it, the desire to, build an academia around it, some of that is simply procrastination, attempting to avoid like the reality that art is only learned in practice. I think that a lot of the resources that exist in art education at the present moment exist to distract. And I think that's probably a controversial statement, but I'm willing to go on the record saying it. I think that's my new perspective coming out of a lot of this practice, is that like, if anybody really wants to do any of this stuff, listening to somebody who's an expert like me is not the first step. The first step is pencil to paper, and it always has been. And every step afterwards also requires pencil to paper. And that doing this inside of a community of people where you discuss this and you consider it along with doing it, has the potential to build a very deep understanding of the subject matter, but there is no understanding without participation. It's none. You could study it for your whole life and think about it every day, right? But until you do it, you don't know it. And you do not need to study it to know it. It will reveal itself to you in practice. And it has for many people for many, many generations. And all the academic study around it will potentially enhance that, but it's not going to define it. The definition of what this experience is happening to me and not to you as a viewer. That's one of the reasons why I'm like constantly pushing this idea. Hey, you should try this too. This is really fun. And it's really great the feeling of like learning and growing. I really like the experience of feeling like I'm getting better at these. I love the skills that I'm building. I've enjoyed getting to share the progress with other people. And I've enjoyed getting messages from people saying that they've been inspired to get back to study and get back to art as a result of watching me do it. So I want to reiterate again for the millionth time, you should give this a shot. It's pretty fucking cool. Like it's good. And there's no better way to be involved with it than to simply just like make time to go ahead and do it for yourself. And that's one of the reasons why I've been so open and encouraging about people's questions, especially beginner questions, because I feel like I want anything that's going to hold you back. I want to break through those barriers and really let you take a swing at this because there are things that you could learn or know that will prevent, like, there's a lack of knowledge that will prevent you from ever like getting to the point where you can scrape away at a canvas in Photoshop. And I don't want you to be stuck on something dumb, like some bit of hardware or software nonsense like I was messing around with today. It's so ridiculous to be stuck in a place like that. I would really rather you be stuck contemplating, your study from today versus the study from a month ago and to figure out what the difference between those two things are. Because it's only in that contemplation that I think you're going to really learn the lessons of art. So, yeah, what I'm doing right now is I'm just trying to figure out the structure. The one I was doing yesterday was actually really interesting because I had this really dynamic pose. There's this great line of action. You can see there's this curve that kind of goes from the shoulder through the body and then out the toe here. And and she's like twisting her hips as she's sort of flying up in the air. The hips are twisted around this way while the shoulder is twisting around this way. We have this classic sort of, you know, torso twist going, the shoulders going one way and the hips going the other way. And in order for me to really figure this out and to feel like I was getting it, I was really working out where the body was positioned underneath the clothes and then working the clothes out on top of it. And in here, I'm getting a little fixated on this thing. Like you can see this sliver of torso underneath the arm, but I'm not being careful about the height of the arm. I'm not being careful about the angle of the arm because I think, oh well, maybe I'll just exaggerate the pose in my own way. But then I'm following the body position along that same axis. And so I'm stuck in this place with this right now where I think I either need to be accurate to all the proportions inside the drawing here, or I need to be accurate to the pose within its own internal logic because they are a little bit mutually exclusive from each other. I need to make sure that the anatomy of the figure feels internally consistent, which it's not at the moment. Once I've got that, I should be good to move on to the interesting parts. Let's see. So we have the legs coming up here, And so the hips are slung forwards like this. So if I'm looking at the rib cage underneath, we've got this really pronounced twist going on here because the we can see the top of the torso through here, the center line as it passes through the neck and then down, we can see the really tight, the tensing of her back. You can see the center line across the spine here very, very clearly. And you can see that like she's twisting and dipping her body this way. And then it's having to reverse the other way to in the hips. So we need to really make sure that that is treated with some level of seriousness here in order to nail the sense of this pose. I mean, I feel like seeing the top of the torso here and the way in which we see the center line coming down the back, that's all good. And then we need to make sure that the hips, the leg is coming up into the hips in a way that frames these hips correctly, and that the you can see kind of the we can see sort of the front of the hip just a little bit, and then it's like we have a little bit of the dress hangs off the back here. It's always so hard to talk about this stuff because it's a lot of it's happening in my mind. My perception of what's happening is being reflected to some degree on the canvas. So you can kind of follow along from it from that perspective. But the only thing that, but the reason why it can manifest on the canvas is because I have some intuitive understanding of it happening in my mind at the moment when I'm making the drawing. I'm holding like the perception of the shape, the three-dimensional shape, in actively in my memory as I'm tracing my hand around, trying to find the three-dimensional object, not just the curvature of the two-dimensional lines. So it's like I'm holding a three-dimensional object in my mind, but I'm expressing a two-dimensional mark, which is then describing a three-dimensional object. It's a process of first encoding the three-dimensional object here on the reference. I think this is the step that everybody doesn't realize is happening. This is a three-dimensional object being expressed as a two-dimensional image. But I'm taking the two-dimensional image and I'm interpreting it into my mind as a three-dimensional shape. And then I'm taking that three-dimensional shape and I'm then re-encoding it back as a series of two-dimensional marks. And the effectiveness of that process is translating into the quality of the image. So if I do a really, really good job understanding the three-dimensional shape that this two-dimensional image is describing, I can then take that 3D object and retranslate it back to 2D. So I'm first encoding all the information into my mind here, and then I'm decoding it again to create this artifact. And if that works really well, then you can do the process one more time where you see my two-dimensional object and translate it into your own three-dimensional shape in your head. The data from the image is just getting passed hand to hand to hand. There are so many points where it can, like, the custody of this information can get lost. Like, and then the way I'm The way I'm decoding the two-dimensional forms here into a three-dimensional shape one skill. That's the skill of seeing, of being able to analyze what I'm seeing. And then my ability to like re-encode it back into a two-dimensional form from the three-dimensional one in my mind. That's a different skill set. And if I'm not doing that all consciously, it's not creating an effective portrayal of the subject matter. You can do it, you can skip all those steps. And what you can do is you can create a grid. This is the way that you see some people work. They create a grid, perfectly measured grid, right? And you may have seen this technique when you're, you know, back in grade school to for art class. What they do is they make a grid and they take that grid and they say, well, on this image, then all we need to do is to ask what information is in this one grid square and translate just the specifics of that. And if you do that really, really carefully, you can just keep it as 2D image data translated to other 2D image data. No encoding, decoding, complex process of understanding the three-dimensional shapes and then re-encoding them from a three-dimensional mental object into another new two-dimensional shape. You can simply take 2D information and copy it to other 2D information, and you can be done. And that's the way that some people do art. When you see a portrait that's done in like hyper realistic style, oftentimes that's what they're doing is they're skipping the part where there's an internal process where they understand the three-dimensional nature of their subject and simply just keep it as a series of wiggly lines and blocks of value contained inside of a simple grid. And it can be very impressive because you look at it and go, wow, look at how realistic it is. It's like, but it's not a realistic understanding of what is in the image. It's simply a totally superficial understanding of the visual qualities that represent the image. Sectors that are light and dark, sectors of contrast. You know, it's almost encoding it the same way a machine would encode the information. So, like, I look at that and I go, well, that seems quite boring to do. It's maybe fun as a craft, but not necessarily as a form of art. It's not expressive because we're not internalizing the uh, the information. We're simply transferring. We're working as a medium of transfer and not like having a not ever like holding and then repeating the info. It's like doing like a rote memorization exercise rather than reading and understanding a piece of text. I'm not trying to discredit what people do when they create photorealistic replications of stuff, but I am just sort of as I'm talking through it, it's dawning on me that it is a different skill set than what I've been doing here, what I've been trying to practice. You know, what I've been trying to practice is I want to be able to do both sides of it. I want to be able to understand what I'm looking at more clearly and have like a more comprehensive library of um you know, like anatomy and how lighting works and all those kinds of things. I want to be able to understand what I'm seeing so that when I'm taking it in, it feels um complete, like I have a more complete understanding of what I'm looking at and what information is coming at me. And then I also want to get better at the process of applying that to a page. how do I efficiently express this in terms of brush strokes? What is my process for um, painting this all out in Photoshop? Those both are very interesting challenges to me. And so I'm trying to do both of those during the study. It may seem like I'm just kind of copying and or maybe I'm just practicing one thing, I'm just practicing art. But there are a lot of discrete skills that I'm practicing simultaneously. There's at least two totally different categories of skills that I'm practicing at the same time when I'm doing these kinds of studies. One input and one output. And they're both super important. Super, super important. And the more I do them, the better I get at them, which has been really cool. And there is I'm miles away from the upper limit of it. 20 years of doing art, been doing this is study number 77 that I'm doing. I feel like I've just scratched the surface. I could be doing this for decades and be constantly feeling like I am getting better and better and better at it. There's so much to learn. Okay. I like the structure of this now. It's in a pretty strong spot. I feel so much more confident nowadays of like knowing that what I'm looking at is correct. This it's not been a specific set of it's not that I've been growing in understanding of like technical knowledge. After doing this like 77 times, I literally just see it better. Like my ability to see whether or not the proportions are correct, everything is just clearer. It's just crisper. I just like I used to not see it and now I do see it. And that feels really great to me. I really love that feeling. Let's see. I'm just going to scale this a little differently so it's about the same height as the reference. There we go. And like the problem I had before is I would look at it and I would go, I know that it's not right, but I don't know, should it be bigger or smaller? Should I move it left or right? Like where does it need to be right? And I couldn't I could see it only in a limited way. And now it's obvious, it's clear. And like I've been feeling that clarification get stronger with each iteration. And that's been very, very, very comforting because it's like it's something that I've been a little weak at for basically my whole art career is this sense that I don't really know when I look at references, I'm never exactly sure what I'm missing. So I try to zoom in close and try to get all the details right and just hope that like I can figure it out on the fly, but I'm always struggling a little bit trying to figure it out. Now I'm struggling so much less. It's become clear. My ability to see has gotten better. And I really think that that's going to translate into basically every other art pursuit that I do. So it's a very fundamental skill to be able to see like, is something too long? Is it too short? Is it too high or low? What is your sense of perception, your perception skill check, you know? It can be manually leveled up, just like going to the gym. And yeah, there's more to go. Oh my god, the more I do this, the more I go, wow, I'm just scratching the surface. So much more to learn. So I'm just doing really, really loose values over the top of this here. The source is in black and white. At some point, I'm going to have to make a choice about do I want to keep the final in black and white or do I want to explore some sort of interesting color treatment for it? We'll see. We will see. I've already gotten like a kind of loose sense of the values, and I have this like, and there's some sort of softer transitions between them. But I have really enjoyed working with a soft brush at this stage of the painting in order to accomplish some like softer transitions across the form. Like one thing you may not notice, but something that's becoming increasingly apparent to me, is these really soft changes in value over the distance of a figure. Um, for instance, if we are just looking at the lighting on the arms going from the top one to the bottom one, you can see across. Oh my god, I accidentally changed the blending mode. Huh, that could have been bad. So if we're just looking at the arms here, right? It's actually a little brighter up on this arm and a little darker down on this arm. And I can exaggerate it here, but there's this gradient that goes, and it's partially because of the angles of our arms, but partially it might due to like a certain amount of light fall off. You can see that like on the ground here, there's a gradient of light and dark. Um, Indoor lights, they have a bit of a fall off. There's a spotlight effect where at the center of the light, it's going to be bright, and then the further it gets from that center, the more it's just kind of like shade away. And so if you look at this, you could see, hey, the light up here is brighter, light down here is a little darker, and it's kind of this soft gradient going from here to here. And so in order to better express those early on, instead of trying to go in and add glazes to it later, I'm just doing a little bit of like extra soft shading because it creates this nice soft transition. Same thing with like subtle turns of form along larger bits like across the torso here. You can see that over here as we get closer to her arm, it gets a little darker, while across her back, it gets a little lighter. We just do this on a separate layer so we can turn it on and off. We see this really dramatically across her arm. Bright across the top of the arm, dark across the bottom. Easy to spot. You could almost draw this like terminal line of where the shadow goes, right? But then on softer forms, like where it doesn't go into a shadow across the torso, it still is turning to a degree. And so we get this sense of it being softer there. And so that's what I've been doing with the soft brush, is just going in and just trying to build in a little bit of those softer transitions early on. That way, when I go do all the detailed shading and stuff on top of it, I'm kind of already in the general vicinity of where I need to be. A vicinity. And so if I can kind of spot the ways in which, like, hey, it's like the fall off, it's like it's darker up towards the top of her forehead, and then we're getting more reflected light underneath by the face. Okay, easy. Well, let's just do a little bit of dark here and a little bit of light down here, and we're closer. We're more in the ballpark. And it's leaving this like soft, glowy look, which is maybe a little cool, but not necessarily what we're going to be looking for in the final. But it's all right because we're going to go and cut out the extra bits of flashing that are in our way. The extra little bits that are kind of poking out the sides, we're going to mash over those. Or if we're doing this in a different order, you could go through and erase them. But this has been really useful to me. When I was looking at my painting demo from 15 years ago, I was actually doing the opposite. I was going through and trying to define every tight crease. I was going through and trying to define every tight crease and every little muscle bend that was creating a sharp little line, every individual strand of hair, and doing all that stuff first rather than the larger shapes. And it was leaving me with this, at the end, I was like, okay, well, I did all the details, and yet my thing still looks wrong. Something that I don't really suffer from anymore. And I've been moving more and more and more away from that the longer that I work, because I'm focused on the broader strokes much more than the details that are catching my attention at the beginning, the more that I do this. And by getting those right, the closer I get to getting those right, the more my work looks like a photograph at a distance, which is kind of interesting. It wasn't an intended result, but I was getting for the first time with my last study, some people were saying, oh, I thought that was a photo when I saw it at a distance. And I went, oh, that's interesting. I never really aspired to be a photorealistic artist. So he said the photorealistic artists are doing something that's pretty different from what I'm doing. But by getting these like broad strokes in correct early, uh, it gives the impression of the photo. It gives the impression of the thing being realistic and correct, even when the details are totally wrong. All right. And so now with that laid in, I'm going to maybe do a little bit of a background over the top of it. This is clean enough where I could actually sketch in a background behind it if I wanted to. Let's start with, if we wanted to create a ground plane here, to do that, you could see the ways in which, because my figure is transparent, the ground plane actually shows up through the legs here, screws up my values a little bit. That's part of the reason I tend to do it on top, is because I'd need to like mask it all out anyway. But it doesn't need to be too precise. One of the things that I do want to capture from this is there's a gradient in the background here. You can see it going darker across the wall and then lighter up near the floor where we have this, the edge of this spotlight or the reflected light. So I want to reproduce that in a rough way. It's the biggest, boldest, most important features that I'm most interested in capturing. And so the ones that I'm attempting to capture first, because then we're going to go back and refine it later. I do like this idea that we are like really getting that spotlight, that we, there's the bottom, that we have this kind of circle here, and that this is sort of like the other edge of it. Bringing that out into the study and exaggerating a little bit, I think could add some real interest to this whole thing. And then there's just like a dingy edge, but maybe the dingy edge, it's like, it's in the photo, maybe it doesn't matter. I think picking the thing that's in the reference that I care about, like the sense of the spotlight, maybe that's the thing we need to really get. And then everything else we can choose to take or leave. The other thing that we see in here is we can see the reflection. If you look, you can see the reflection of her legs running back the other way, which I think is an excellent detail to bring in here. You can even see the reflection of the part that's lighter on the ankle. So typically I'm cutting in something over the top. I think I'm still going to do that just to get rid of this, get rid of the glow some. And then, make a more meaningful mark that like distinguishes where the silhouette is, since we have this very, very rough version of it right now. Um, so at this point, I'm going to be cleaning up this initial work, and then I'm going to be going into some details and deciding on whether or not I want to give this a bit of a color treatment. I might not. I haven't done a black and white study in a bit, so it might be fun to really keep this thing black and white. And with me being on my way on this thing, that means it's time for you guys to come up on stage and ask me questions or chit chat about whatever. I'm available to talk about art process, life of being an artist, questions for me in particular, whatever you want. If you guys want to raise your hand, you can come up on stage and come and join me. I think we got somebody who's already got their hand raised, ready to speak. Oh wait, no, they disappeared. Otherwise, I will just continue to narrate my thoughts here.
Hello.
Monster, hello.
Yeah, hello. I have a question. How many pussy you get?
How many what?
Pussy you get?
One. Okay, that was an easy question to answer. Hey, Gallifrey, how's it going? You are muted.
Sorry.
There you
Pretty
go.
good. How are you doing?
Oh, I turned my speakers up on that last idiot, and now you're super loud. So how's it going?
Ah, did your wife hear you say you only have one?
No.
That's good. It's
I have said
people.
though that I think that is being good at something is a very attractive feature. So it's probably
That's true.
anybody who's looking to make themselves attractive for a partner. I mean, it you could do a lot worse than learning to get good at art. I mean,
Yeah.
you really could.
My question was about um improving anatomy work. Like
Sure.
you're doing such a nice job there, and she'd probably look like an octopus if I did it. But
I feel like I've done some very, very gremlin-y faces over the course of this study, like even live on stream. You might have even seen some that were like pretty horrible mid progress.
well, not really.
Not really? Maybe you missed those
Well,
streams.
I always compare it to my own stuff, and I have trouble with figure drawing.
Okay.
But what do you recommend? Do you recommend any of those anatomy textbooks, or just
No.
practicing it over and over?
So I've had some really interesting experience. I'm trying to think of what are the most meaningful experiences of learning anatomy in my own history. Um, I was having this discussion recently with because like there's I've been thinking a lot about this idea of like people learning art from a purely academic way, and then um, how I don't think that that's actually the most effective way to do it. And I'm seeing there is a lot of resources out there that are intended for people to kind of learn like not just like artistic anatomy, but sort of biological anatomy. They're trying to learn the names of all the bones and muscles and stuff, and like where they connect, and they learn a
Right.
lot of academic language around um the anterior uh uh you know tibia like connects over here with the I'm trying to remember. There's a bunch of muscles I've been learning recently. I'm like forgetting them now that I'm on the spot. But yeah, it's just like there's you can a lot of people think that learning anatomy involves learning human biology on this really deep level, but I ended up, becoming a successful character artist prior to learning any of that stuff. So I'm convinced that there's a gap between learning all of the shapes of people and learning all of the like bones and muscles, like the or
Mhm.
and so um like if you learn all the bones and muscles, like you should be able to generally get a sense of the shapes of people. But that presumes that they like a lot of the anatomical study, they sort of presume in like an average human. But like we're not really always interested in the average human. Like
Right.
we have interests in people who are like very extreme shapes in a lot of cases. Like every athlete, every model, all the people who we want to see photos of, the kinds of people who we typically draw are not normally shaped at all. And so our own personal fascinations with particular, human aesthetics kind of depart from this whole like academic understanding of biology. Um, and so like where I started with this was actually in, like I was into anime and I was like I wanted to draw these like long skinny people with broad shoulders and like skinny limbs and thin
Uh,
torsos. Um and I enjoyed sort of like this figures that had androgynous really androgynous forms that mixed, masculine and feminine traits. And I appreciated though like there's a certain rhythm to the human body that is you know, many people find very appealing. And it's like noticing like the ways in which like a dimple forms on the inside of the
mhm,
forearm can be just fascinating. Like you notice it in people. I remember trying to draw a character with a muscular forearm that was like bent at a right angle. And I couldn't figure out where all the muscles wrapped around on there because I didn't have any anatomical knowledge. But then I was in a pool hall and I saw somebody bending their arm and I was studying like the shapes that were overlapping in their muscles in person. And I was like, oh, that's what it's all about. Like that's what those shapes are supposed to look like. And it was in my curiosity in like actually looking at people, not from like as a pile of like meat, but like as a elegant set of forms that I gained like a library of understanding about like what are the elegant forms that make up a person's body. And so you can understand people as a series of like elegant shapes rather than a series of like bones and tissue. And in doing so, I think that there's actually a lot to learn about like, like we have these, I'm using a reference of a dancer here. Like this is not just a person standing. This is an
mhm.
expressive form. And it is through that expression that we're like getting an emotion and we are fascinated by the forms in front of us. And it's like it's that curiosity that led me to get like what I would think of as like an understanding of anatomy, but it's not literally learning anatomy. Um, and I think that all you need to be able to build that is repetition. Like what you need more than a book on it. There's good books that like break this stuff down to a degree,
Mhm.
but more than that, you just need a constant curiosity. So what I what I would do is I would try to draw like a thing that was in my head, a pose I wanted to express, an emotion I wanted to express, and I would do a shit job of it because I didn't know what I was doing. And then I would explore references and I would keep my eye out for things that I would see. And like as I was remaining curious, the answers would be presented to me and I would go, ah, that's it, that's it. And I would, take that back to the canvas. And that cycle of curiosity and discovery that kept that created for me a library of understanding of all of the like expressive shapes of the body.
Mhm.
And then once I started to learn some of the anatomy on top of it, it all like I'm like, oh, it's because that muscle wraps around over there and pokes out. That's why it creates a dimple. But like the knowing of the scientific reasons why there's a dimple in somebody's arm are so unimportant because the thing that fascinates us is like the aesthetics of it. Like
Yeah.
everybody's got their different body parts that they see in other people that draw their attention and like make their pupils dilate, that rouse their imagination. And they're like, those are different for everybody. And so, like, finding where our eyes stick and what we're fascinated in, and like the ways that we want to express the human form in imaginatively are infinitely more important than learning the names of all the bones. And so, I think that that's why it's like the answer is you just need to practice a bunch. But
Mhm.
the activity of practice is one that, focuses on your own interest and curiosity and not like this like sense that you're doing it wrong. Like of course you're going to do it wrong. Like we're all doing it wrong. Like there is a level of wrongness that is essential, so essential to the process. Like I don't think that we're really aiming to be perfect um perfectly representing muscles and bones.
Hmm.
I think that we're really aspiring to do is like, you know, show something more like what a dancer does. I think that an artist, when they're drawing a human form, is trying to be like an actor or a dancer who's expressing something with the body than like, a cadaver on, inside of a biology lab, you know?
Yeah.
And
My first film professor, years and years ago, told us, I apologize to all of you in advance, but this is going to ruin film for you. Everything you learn. Because you won't be paying attention to the plot, you'll be paying attention to, how the scene is shot and where things are placed.
oh,
But
I love doing that.
I
I've
know.
grown to appreciate film so much more by paying attention to the artifice of film.
Exactly. And I love it. The people around me might not love it because I'm like, oh, I love that. And I
Yeah.
talk about how something was shot and they're like, uh-huh.
Mhm.
But with art, like I have slammed on my brakes and got onto the berm just to get out of the car when I've seen a particularly like scraggly looking tree that and I grab
Right.
my phone and take a picture of it. And like you said, that guy in the pool hall, I have sneakily taken pictures of someone when I thought they were really interesting, like their hands were gorgeous or,
Right.
something or somebody was particularly
Yeah, I mean,
muscular.
I'm trying to speak about this in a way that doesn't sound lewd because it's really not.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of like being fascinated with the human body on like a purely sexual way. There is
Right.
like an aesthetic appreciation that we all have for the human form that captures our attention in different ways, and it captures each of us differently. And so, like, yeah, you see someone with like really elegant, knobbly hands, and you go, "Oh my god!"
Yeah.
Like, look at all those shapes, like, holy shit. And, I think it's that appreciation that's really what I'm describing. So
Yeah.
that is half of it. And I don't think you can teach. That's the part I don't think you can teach. Because
Yeah.
like it doesn't matter how much you would go through and explain all this stuff to somebody. If they were not fascinated by somebody with really incredible hands, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what they learn, they're never going to really apply it. But, like, if you feel that way about it, the only thing you need to really be able to improve your understanding of anatomy is to try to reapply what you found interesting about those hands onto the page with a bunch of mistakes and create like a cycle of insight where you are observing it. And then it's like what I was saying at the beginning. It's like we have this really convoluted process where we see a two-dimensional image, we turn it into 3D, then we take the 3D, we turn it back into 2D. And it's this moving it from hand to hand and encoding and decoding that ultimately produces the artistic process. And
Mhm.
like when you're seeing somebody who is doing something incredible or like looks particularly interesting, you're doing half of it. And if you can do both halves of it and be not only taking it in, but also be putting it back down onto the page, and that will the process as you run it both ways, as you take it in and then push it back out, both of them inform the other one. So the more you practice this like pushing it onto the page, the more you'll see in the world. And the more you see in the world, the more material you get to be able to apply it back to the page. And it's this virtuous cycle, both ends of which feel great. And you
Yeah.
get to keep repeating that. And that repetition is what ultimately builds that like knowledge of anatomy. And I don't think there's a replacement for that. I think if you were to, while doing that, study anatomy on a really deep level, it would probably add to that experience where you would have like a clearer understanding of like, I see now where these muscles are attaching, or like I understand because I understand what this bulge is exactly how the knee is being positioned on the opposite side. That kind of understanding can build on it, but it's an adjunct. The primary process is in seeing and recreating, and it always will be. And like in the in the atelier system, learning art as like in the Renaissance, the way that they taught a lot of this stuff is by sitting somebody in front of a plaster cast and having them replicate it in graphite over the course of like 100 hours. And
Wow.
there's still there's academies in Russia that do this still pretty actively, and there's some in the US that like have replicated this process. But this atelier style training is about spending 100 hours on a single drawing in black and white. And it's like it's through that time spent considering and like really seeing and really analyzing and going back and forth with a reference that like is what creates that deep, deep knowledge. So
Hmm.
much so more so than like looking in books and stuff.
And these
So
ballerinas and high fashion models make great references for like these contorted action sort of
oh yeah.
poses. They do crazy things with their bodies.
I love some of these. Like there's this one series that's like all bunch of models posing underwater.
Oh, cool.
And I have a few of them in my reference folder, and I did this one study of one of them, and I just love it. And that's like the same sort of thing. I love people in sort of free fall or zero gravity or floating.
Yeah.
I really love to see the ways in which people are like um move their body when they're unmoored from the ground. There is something really dramatic about a person in repose, but there's something that's so incredibly dynamic when they just completely let go of gravity.
And that the number 67, the fashion model in the yellow dress, I remember asking you if that was AI because I thought there's no way that
Well, what
her
they
hip
do
actually
also is
moves like that. In
what
the
you do is you put your weight on a foot in a way that looks kind of wrong. You lean in a way over to an extreme degree that is like not a position you can balance for very long, or you move in motion in a way that you can get your body in a position that it can be there for a moment, but not like supported. And then you have a fan blowing everything way up in the air. They stick a giant fan underneath someone, blow their hair way up in the air,
I
and
have
like
somebody follow me around with a fan.
I know, like, and he's in like this sort of situation, it's the same thing. Like when you have
Oh
like
yeah. I love that one.
you hit somebody with a big ass fan, you can make it seem like there's this tremendous amount of motion and energy, even if they're standing perfectly still. So I typically, when I'm drawing a figure, I will like give them a cape or you know, or give them like long hair or something and have it like blowing and like moving around because I want to accentuate that motion and I want to show that dynamic action because like I don't get to show the actual animation. I only get to show the forces through the ways in which they interact with physical objects in a single moment. So I love drawing clouds and like bushes and rocks and things because I can shape them however I want to. Because if I were going to put some rocks behind this girl, I could make these big jagged rocks that are like accentuating the motion, or I could
Yeah.
have a cloud that is like swirling backwards and accentuating like the waves of motion that she has going on. And like no one's going to say, "Oh, that's a horribly unrealistic shape for a cloud," because like it can these things they can take any shape and so we can use them as framing elements to sort of stand in for the actual physical objects swirling through the environment. So you can have somebody standing stock still with their arms crossed and then you can draw a big explosion of like cloud behind them and get this sense that they have this aura emerging from them and this like energy like pulsating off of them, you know, sort of
Yeah.
produce a sense of dynamism and presence to them, which I've always loved being able to do that. It's like talk about. I mean, you were talking about like the artifice of film. Like there is
Yes.
so much art of that. Like all creative mediums have their own artifice to them, and I think like understanding it it doesn't disempower the work. I mean, if anything,
No.
I think it always adds to it because when you see that in another artist's work, I feel like it adds a layer of understanding as to like what it is about what you're seeing that is causing the impression of it. I've always loved that. Going to an art museum, the older I get and the better I
Uh,
get at art, the more going to art museums becomes really, really exciting.
yeah, I love sitting in the museum here, Philadelphia Museum of Art. It's take pictures and then go home and try to recreate what I've seen, you know?
There's always a lot of these classic works of art. If you can find the name or whatever, there's often high res scans of this stuff because it's not like it's under copyright, you know?
Right. Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Thank you. I'll let
yeah,
someone
thanks for
else
coming
come
on
up.
stage.
Good to talk to you again.
Hmm. Mm. All right. So process has slowed down a little bit as I only really wanted to cut in a little bit around the face and the arm. Now I'm just kind of poking away at some of the little crusty bits here and there. I think I need to attack this with a little bit more of a plan and certainly a little bit more careful in terms of my marks, maybe a little bit more precise on the tool that I'm using. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to start working a little bit with my round brush, which is my most precise and powerful tool in my toolbox here. Okay. Um, yeah, I keep wanting to get in here and like get a little bit more precise about stuff. One of the things that's really helped me though is actually a dedication to staying a little bit more looser and a little bit more expressive with some of these marks. So I'm going to try to balance getting like actually paint a face in here, get a little bit more precision with some areas that are a little bit looser and more expressive that give a greater sense on the impression of the work, or the impression of the figure rather than the figure itself. So finding that balance, that's been one of my main challenges recently. See, I want to like cut in a mouth because I see this line here. Again, going back to my oldest habits. But I think what I need to do is focus on the larger stuff first. What are the big shapes around the face? And then I'll find where all those smaller bits need to go eventually. But I think keeping it a little looser, keeping it a little more general, that's going to give me the better result faster. If anybody else wants to come up, feel free to raise your hand. I know I'm talking very high-mindedly about art right now, but one of my favorite things to do during these streams is to answer beginner questions about the most fundamental things when it comes to using Photoshop or making art. I I love solving problems for people so they can jump more into this themselves. No takers. Okay. If you guys want to chill and just watch me stream, that's cool too. When I'm doing this on Twitch, I usually have stream beats going these days. I used to have really active voice chat going, but I'm trying out just doing it all with me on the mic the whole time. And so during the dead air, it's nice to have some chill beats to study and relax to. I'm not sure how we would do that on this setup though. This is such a good reference. Sometimes I feel a little stuck with making sure like that it's the figure that needs to be expressed very precisely to feel like it's correct. And in this one, I feel like I'm able to stay a little looser with it without it becoming incoherent, which is a nice feeling. It's really nice. So yeah, we have like, as we go up the arm here, you can see I'm working with a really low resolution image, tons of JPEG artifacting, lots of pixels. We have this really, really hard shadows here on the inside of the elbow. And like you can see it's kind of over sharpening and creating this dark halo because it's like a dark background against a light figure. None of that is important to us. I don't think this matters. What I really care about is showing some of the volume of her muscles. I want to see we're getting some nice light across the top of the delts here. See, I know a couple muscles. There's the delts, and then the tricep is kind of folding around here. And I want to build more than anything a sense of motion and light. And the actual edges of it, I don't think are really going to be that important. So I put this little dark mark in here before just because I noticed, oh, high contrast dark mark, I should add that in. I don't think I need it actually. I was noticing this dimple over here, the dimple in the elbow. I always think the dimple in the elbow is always an interesting little moment in the arm. Anywhere that creates a dimple, I always find to be kind of interesting. It shows a little bit of tension. All right. The other thing that I'm noticing here is there's this like, it tapers towards the wrist, and then we have this really pronounced jut of the radius or ulna, one of the two of the wrist bones, that wrist bump. There's the bone that goes this way and the bone that goes this way. The bone that goes this way is like jutting out. And I always think that bump at the wrist is always a very interesting feature to capture. I tend to exaggerate it in my drawings. I don't know what's going on with the over sharpening here. It makes it look like there's two bumps. She has a spike sticking out of her forearm. Totally unneeded. We can use our little bit of anatomical knowledge here to say that that's probably not what we're looking for. There's a bulb of the side of the hand next to the pinky. And we're getting a really dynamic shadow with this tight core and this really strong fill light coming from underneath that's filling in the inside of the palm. The floor, the spotlight hitting the floor down here, light is bouncing off of the concrete. So as the floor is filling with light, it's actually emitting light upwards, and it's catching on the underside of her palm at the top here. So I want to make sure to capture some of that, and then we can kind of see, I'm going to move this thumb down a little bit. Rotate this thumb down so we get a little bit more accurate to the pose. Clean up the seam, easy, easy. And the space between the palm and the thumb, and that crook there, it's capturing a lot of shadow. I like the way, so we've got the pinkies coming out kind of straight here. See the shadow running across the pink side of the pinky is really giving us a clear definition on its pose. And then the other fingers are flexing upwards, flaring up towards the sky. And if we could exaggerate that a little bit, I think we'll probably capture some of what's happening. It's like the pinky and the ring finger tend to move together. That's what I mean about the academic knowledge of the anatomy kind of complementing the aesthetic. So the pinky and the ring finger tend to move together. And then I think then this means this has to be her middle finger that's coming up, kind of flexing backwards like this. And then the other one that's between it, that's kind of captured in the background there, that's got to be the pointer finger. But that middle finger pointing up is really defining this hand, this curve. You can see this, the way it creates this bowl backwards like this. You can see the tension in it as a result of it flexing from the wrist over to the finger there. And that's what I want to capture this. So I'm not going to try to get every detail in the hand, but I want to figure out what are the important details and can we exaggerate a little bit because the hand is so expressive. Add a little extra dollop of white and spread it around to really emphasize the light in this area here. And then we get this little bit of a shadow that's carrying across the forearm here. Again, she's got very defined muscles. Dancers, unlike models, tend to be fairly muscular. And you can see their strength in their bodies. Models, in a lot of cases, tend to just be fairly thin. Dancers tend to be very, very strong. So I find their bodies to be generally more interesting to draw. The anatomy of the hand and arm has always been something that I'm pretty fascinated by. The whole like chain through here. I've always it always captures my attention, and so I tend to be a little bit whenever I have like an arm striking a really strong pose like this, I tend to put a decent amount of focus on it. Maybe this is one of the reasons why I was drawn to this reference photo. I keep watching lean beef patties videos. Tend to confuse myself a little bit when I have my my reference at different sizes than my painting. Reorient these a little bit. Because I did all of the underwork, getting the values generally right and the longer transitions of value generally right, and like the structure of everything in mostly the right place, you can see that a lot of what I'm doing is like either making minor adjustments, carving edges or pushing around like values in like little subtle areas. I'm not bringing in a lot of new colors. I'm just pushing around what's already there. And that's because of all the prep work that was going into it earlier. She's got a little bit of a rounder face, more of a that Eastern European look. Maybe as a Russian dancer, huh? My wife's got the same look. No, we really not don't have anybody who wants to come up and chit chat today. Anything you guys want to discuss? Come up on stage. It's fine.
There are a few people that keep flickering, but not long enough for me to click anything.
Maybe they want to be asking me lewd questions. Hey, wonderful world of stuff. How's it going, man?
Hey, how's it going? I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, question that I keep getting asked in chat all the time is because I'm I'm good at promoting my stuff as you know me. I do my art stuff on T-shirts and stuff like that. It's more merchandise and album covers and stuff. But as an artist, what advice do you give to people to help promote their works?
Um, yeah, sadly, the state of promoting your work comes down to social media these days, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Um, I don't love social media. I don't love using it. I don't love that it's like the main gateway that we find a lot of work these days. Um, it's very frustrating for people to jump into because it is kind of uneven in the ways that it seems to reward. Uh, it doesn't reward the things that we necessarily value.
Mm.
So we want somebody to be like create beautiful, expressive art, and we would want the social media to be rewarding that, and it does sometimes, but it's
Yeah.
pretty inconsistent.
Yeah, exactly my words a couple of days ago. I said it rewards repetition and consistency of posting. And when you're creating a piece of art, it takes time. You know, it's not something you're going to just blurt out every 5 minutes. And yeah, it's consistency is what they're asking, is what social media rewards, isn't it? It's awful. Yeah.
Yes, and so it becomes kind of scary to be experimental, especially like once you get a little bit of a success going, it's like you want to keep it going, and so trying to figure out um, what the algorithm liked about whatever last post you made and try to repeat that is often the game, and that's not what creative people want to do. And so I found that like the most successful strategy, the most successful hack that I've seen work for people is to develop genuine relationships with other social media users. That like within like spheres of art, people who are posting art, people who are already successfully building audiences, they tend to also genuinely like the kinds of stuff in their community. If they post a lot of anime art, they tend to actually like anime art. And so if you my suggestion to people is to always find pockets where people like the same stuff that you do and do what you can to form genuine relationships with those other users.
Blend with the communities. Yeah.
Yeah. And in some like on Twitter especially, if you are spending time in someone's comment section, like leaving real genuine comments and not wow, great one, like actually saying something and like noticing them and being like genuine towards them in your appreciation, um, that they will check out your profile. And if
Right.
you're into the same stuff as them, there's a chance they might follow you. And then they do follow you, there's a chance they might retweet you. And I've had friends who have attempted to use this strategy to genuinely try to create connections with people who they look up to their work and have succeeded pretty broadly in being able to successfully develop those connections and then leverage them to build their own audience. So it's like, it sounds like it's this really cynical thing where you try to like talk your way into like a fancy party or whatever, but it's really not. It's just like a friendly gathering. There's a series of friendly gatherings that are kind of happening across the internet, and anybody's welcome to join as long as they like are nice and they all like the same stuff. And that's actually not that tough of a thing to do. And so I found that like that works pretty well on Twitter. It's too bad Twitter's kind of in a weird spot. I think even on Instagram, it could probably not be a bad idea to like get engagement from accounts that are like yours, but with more followers. I think that like more people should be doing this instead of feeling like treating it like they're running their own broadcast station out of their basement, like some sort of weird UHF thing. You shouldn't be treating art as this thing that you stand on stage and you art as hard as you can until someone notices you. Like, I think it has to be done as part of a community, and it has to be done like with a genuine appreciation for what the community does and participates in. And like, that's not a surefire way to be able to be noticed in the world of social media, but it's there's not a lot of options. So it's better than a lot of the other things that people tell you to do. I mean, there's a lot of cynical advice out there in terms of how to get your work noticed. And I've heard it all, and most of it's pretty bad. And some of it's pretty dark. I would say like sharing things that you care about with people who have a common interest is like that's as good as it gets. I think that's ultimately what we're looking for. I've been finding that more and more on places like Discord, but unfortunately, it doesn't scale into an audience, which is frustrating because there is a part of this where we want to be able to like create an audience that allows us to like, turn our passion into a career. I've been running this Kickstarter. Kickstarter's been going pretty good, and it's like a lot of people would want to do something like that, and you can't do that just by like making some friends on a Discord. You need to have a presence that extends out to the public as well, and that's a bigger problem to solve. I would say it's easier the more authentically you're creating. I think that with there being such a huge marketplace of different styles of art and ideas and ways of people expressing themselves, you should just like make the things you actually care about with a total disregard for an audience. Because like, I mean, you're able to do things at a much more massive, broader scale. So you can target like specific interests like pets, sports, things like that. But for an artist who has to spend a lot of time on every single piece, you don't really get the luxury of targeting. You can't be like, well, I'm going to try to draw a painting for every sports team, for every football team in the US. Like, you just don't, like, that could be a whole year of your time spent.
Yeah, that's where I specialize. You see, that's exactly what I specialize in. So targeting groups and working within it. So that's this is where when it comes to art. If I can, I never class my stuff as art. You see, I think I obviously was a cartooner. I don't, I see what you do as art. I see what other people do, but I don't see what I do as art. That's just me though. I just draw. I just play about. That makes sense.
That's the game, though. I mean, playing about is the ideal. I want to argue for playing about, but it's like I think that's what creates the success. But it's like, like you have to be judicious when it comes to developing a brand as an artist, because you just don't get to make enough pieces to, like, I mean, comparison wise, like. How many pieces of art have you made for your business in the last year?
Me, I'm retired now, but I mean,
well, when you're
physical
making designs for your store, like how many pieces were being created for the store per year?
maybe around about 500-600.
Okay. A
Because
year I produce maybe about 15 paintings.
yeah, with the team, you see, we're scaling up on something like you say, the football team, and we scale up on it, and we all get to work on it, and so that's that's the difference. As I say, we target an audience and we scale on it, and that it's a whole different. It's not. It is art, of course it is, but it's a whole different world, you know. It's not mass producing, is it per se? But we're just targeting. But again, it's t-shirt design, it's graphic design, it's you know. It's only just recently where people go, no, it is actually art. I'm like, yeah, I guess, I suppose, but you know, I never saw it as that. You know, it's just the way I am, the way my head works. You know, it was, again, I love it. I enjoy it, and that's the. If you can do a job, do work. I didn't have to rely on it putting food on the table at the beginning. It was a side hustle that built up and became
Yeah.
something. It was like, wow, this is bloody. We can do this. My 3 daughters all do it today, and every day they wake up and they love going to work because they get to just create, and it's their job. They get paid for it. It's amazing. They love it, and I'm so happy that they found that same. They've grown up watching me do it and watch me enjoy it, and have just followed suit, and yeah, a blessing for definite. But yeah, I don't have experience with galleries. I don't have experience with this and that, and a
Yeah,
lot
I
of people
mean,
ask. Oh, you don't? I was hoping you did, because people ask me these questions. I only know what I know, and they're like, well, "What do you know then?" I'm like, "Well, I know about algorithms, I know about graphic design, I know about this and this, and, you know, and you know."
well, that's where the most art is being
Yeah,
traded these days is through algorithms and through graphic design, and it's like the amount
yeah,
of
and
art traded in galleries is pretty limited. And
yeah. This is it. This is why I didn't have advice for a lot of people. He said, I've got all these artworks. I'm like, well, you must know, do you have artist friends? Do they do, I don't know I don't know what galleries, I don't, you know. And he was pretty much like, no, not really. I just sort of, pretty much a recluse in what he does. But he was saying, you know, but you are the master of this and that, you know, of getting it out there and getting yourself seen under brands and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but no, I'm not. It's different. It's not. I said, you know something, I'll talk to somebody about it. And I was going to talk to yourself and Clutch. I know that he creates a lot of work with Midjourney, and then he recreates it and paints it.
Mhm.
And I know he went and did a gallery show at some stage, and he's in super users right now. As you can see him down there. And I want to ask him how it went and what his experience was, you know, and so forth. Because I have no experience in it whatsoever. But as I say, you do the shows though, right? You were doing the shows with your stuff.
Yeah, I was doing conventions. Like conventions are really different than a
And
gallery. It's like
yeah,
you rent out your bit of concrete and then you try to do what you
expensive,
can
right?
with it. Um,
Yeah.
Galleries, the individual shows, they
Mm.
try to like, do sort of the same thing as conventions in the sense that they're attempting to bring people in the door. Like when you buy your booth at a convention, what you're paying for is the people. You're
Right.
paying for somebody to come in the door who you can
Traffic.
then have a
Yeah.
shot at selling to.
Right.
And I think that gallery is intended to be sort of the same thing, where you are, you are giving up some value to the gallery because they're bringing bodies in the door. I've
Mm.
known some people though that their experience with gallery was primarily that they were being expected to bring their audiences in the door. So they had built a reputation for themselves, and there was a love for their art. And then the gallery was like, "We should bring those people here, and give us, 40% or whatever." I'm like,
Yeah.
if how about they bring people in the door, and then they can take their 40%.
Yeah.
I've always been thought like if I could get my work, if I could get somebody to show up because I was there, I want to keep all the money.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the opposite of the mentality of somebody who's aspiring to work with galleries. But yeah, the process of figuring out how to like acquire the attention of someone is the main problem in a lot of our economy right now. It's like we have all this content, and the question is, how do you get people to like watch your videos or look at your JPEGs or click on your shop or whatever? And there is not a concise and consistent way of accomplishing that goal. There's a lot of right answers, and there's like 1,000 times as many wrong answers. You gotta have good content, probably.
Yeah. It's
But
getting hard out there. I know it is for the people that I know in the industry, but because when you say when I say 300 or 500 pieces a year, so I think it's designs, 300 to 500 designs a year. That's how I see it in my head. I don't see it as a piece of art, I see it as a design. And but I'm looking at the last couple of years now, and it's getting tough out there, even for something we've been doing it for like 30 years, so we're veterans in what we do, and yeah, I think we're down about 60, 70% over the last 2 or 3 years, but we're diversifying into other things. We literally, I don't know if I explained last one time, they literally sell prompts to companies who can't be bothered to learn about prompting. So they're literally prompt, I can't think what it's called now. There's a prompt station someplace, and it's like the number one place to buy prompts. We're making thousands on there right now as a business, because that's crazy that the girls have diversified to the point where they said the studio now it's kind of weird because we're all sitting there and just working out every new style or every new kind of AI that comes out. They're there, and they're heading up. They're becoming, I say, all the colorists have become prompt engineers. It's a surreal situation.
Interesting.
But now we're providing for the companies who are saying, right, well, they don't want a prompt engineer, they don't want this and that, but they want to be able to buy it, so they can say, right, I just want to change it to a giraffe, goat, just change the name, the styles there ready for me, done, dusted. So they want stability in the prompts, and that's a sideline. That sideline alone, the kids have started. That's paying the wages and covering the rent. I said, wow, just on selling prompts, that's mental. That's crazy. Prompt base is the number one place, I believe.
Interesting.
But that's yeah.
I had heard a bit about that, but I didn't.
Oh, it's huge now. Huge.
And but then it's like, okay, well, I remember when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, you were all excited because you're like, oh my God, I can go and use ChatGPT to help with the prompting design.
Yes.
And I was like, well, that was a short life for the prompt engineer. They were replaced by AI within less than 1 year after coming into existence, because now because with a text-based AI, like as a text product, like theoretically, it's easy to replace. But
well,
I guess
as prompt engineers, they're booming, because say, for example, you buy the prompt for $6.99 and it's a V3 prompt. What the kids are doing now is that as soon as V4.A came out, for 4B, 4C, and whatever, blah blah blah, they would recreate the prompt and then give it to the person who's bought the $6.99 one and say, oh, by the way, V4's out. Here's the latest that prompt you bought off us about wildlife, watercolor wildlife. Here's the updated version, free. Oh, and by the way, we've got 50% off sale on all these new prompts we've done here. And below that you'll find loads of ChatGPT prompts to help you with CVs, this, that. So they've evolved. It's a surreal situation to watch our company turn from but it's evolve or die at this point, and so they're running with the flow. My daughter, she's the eldest, she understands that they've probably only got 2 years or so, 3 years of this prompt sort of selling rubbish. She said it's going to be a flash in the pan, because eventually you'll just tell it and it'll understand you. You won't have to have all these prompts. And so she says maximum 2 years of it. But right now they are on every Etsy, eBay, Amazon, they're selling prompts. Once they've made the package for one website, it's on all of them. It's incredible. And yeah, absolutely. They make it thousands a day on it. Thousands. It's crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had no idea that anyone was able to transform prompts into thousands a day.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, it was about 6-7 months ago. She was telling me about it, and it was like, oh, we're making about $100 a day on it. Still was talking American terms, and then also, but yeah, now they're turning over, $4 or $5 grand a week easily, and it's all free. It's just a very, very little
There's
time.
no cost of delivery on prompt.
Nope, none at all. It's all sitting there ready done. And once it's done for one, it's just automatically, they've got an auto generation that just generates it to every platform for sale. Boom, done. and the second you buy it, we've got the hook because you got the email, you've got the contact,
Yeah.
and you keep giving them
You got a
free
warm
stuff.
lead that's going to be good for a while.
And those leads just keep burning. Yeah. And then also in the days like, oh, if you want a request, you want one making, we'll make one for you. And and just genial the way they've adapted to the reduction of sales because of lots of things actually. Timu and Shane and all this lot, that they're having a massive effect on the t-shirt industry. I know it's not, but it's still, that's what we do. We put art on t-shirts and sell them.
Yeah.
That's our number one. That's our number one outlet. Like you when you're walking around looking at people's muscles, I'm looking at people's chests because I see t-shirts everywhere. Everywhere I look, I see a t-shirt design. I go, oh, that's clever. I'm going to do that, but I'm going to make it better. That's how I do it. That's what my head says when I see a t-shirt that's cool. Yeah, so I'm constantly glaring at people's chests, and I have to often stop and say, I will stop purposely realizing what I'm doing and go, I love that t-shirt. Make a big, and then they also realize, oh, he's not staring at my boobs. I don't know if they're disappointed or not, but at least I'm making a point of what I'm doing because I realize I'm transfixed by something. And go, that's so clever. That typography layout. I never thought of that, And so, yeah, I stare at people a lot too. But I don't take sneaky pictures of them, Gallifrey. Was it Gallifrey?
I don't take sneaky pictures either, for the record.
It made me laugh when Gallifrey said that. I'm gonna definitely, tease her about that one. But so yes, you don't have a gallery experience in sales, but so basically,
I don't know. The galleries, there's still some galleries that exist and stuff. There's a marketplace for people to feel like they are spending their money well when they spend $20,000 on a piece of work, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to spend that much money, you want to feel like you're getting you're getting something of value. Not necessarily that you're getting a great deal. Like the point in a lot of cases with the premium art market is that you want to spend a lot of money, but you want to feel like that money is being well spent.
Yes.
And so there has to be a whole marketplace. There has to be a whole narrative of like why some art is more valuable than others, right?
Yeah.
And so there has to be somebody who is dictating what is of higher and lower value in a marketplace like that. Tastemakers. So you have auction houses like like Sotheby's and whatnot that get involved and help control prices and ensure that people who spend money feel like that their money is well spent, so that they will come back and buy more later. And it's all a big game. And I've never understood the rules of those games. I don't have a lot of aspiration or curiosity about it.
Yeah.
So I don't really like when it came for digital art, when NFTs were like the thing for a minute.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, well, I do digital art, and I'm one of the best known digital artists in the world. I mean, compared to the average digital artist, I'm far better known. So maybe I'll be successful in the fine art world of digital art. And the answer was pretty broadly a no. Like whatever it is that like gets people to be fascinated with, whatever gets people to like say this digital art is worth $100,000 and this digital art is worth zero. I don't understand the kind of social construct of it, and like I don't know how to speak the language of the people who exist in those spaces. So I would find that even if I could get an audience with those kinds of people, I would immediately get this sense they were rolling their eyes and waiting for me to stop talking, regardless of whatever I said, because I was just like I was not part of that community. It's a social thing, and I could never quite tune into it. But when it came to like the question of like, do people like my art and do they want to take it home? I could solve that problem. Like if I could get into a room with a bunch of people who are wandering around with $300 in their pocket, I know some of them would spot my work and they would say, I want that. And I would be able to talk to them about it, and I would be able to offer them something that they would want, and I would be able to like convince them to take something home. And I could do that enough where I was able to make a real living. I could make a real living just like being a traveling salesman. I just like don't really want to be on the road that much anymore. And at a certain point, it was just about my family. Like I was on the road a lot when my kids were small. It was annoying. I didn't like it. I preferred once everything got locked down from the pandemic. I said, yeah, that's a good place to make a break. And I just never went back out again. And so got to tuck my kids in every night since then.
Yeah.
It's been great. But I think that for a lot of people who are jumping in, social media is the way that we find out about a lot of artists. But like the other place that we find artists is live in person at live events. It is so much easier to find a fan and to make a sale at a live event compared to at online. I mean, even in your industry, in the t-shirt game, I'm sure the same is probably true. It's like if you have the right set of inventory at the right event, if you're at a sports game or whatever, selling sports jerseys is really easy.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
100%. Yeah. I used to in the days of old. I used to go outside consoles and stuff, and I wouldn't be selling fake T-shirts of that band, but I'd be selling, stuff like like backstage T-shirts, stuff that says backstage passes and all sorts of different stupid, silly pundit types.
yeah,
Okay. Take me home with you was one of my. If I went to the. But yeah, also different. Literally, women wearing T-shirts saying "Take me home with you," and they're just literally standing there in the crowd, and they bought that T-shirt off me for £24 because they want to wear it, and hopefully Mick Jagger's going to see them wearing it and take them home. But I would sell hundreds at a time.
yeah.
So I learned to sell ice to Eskimos. Yeah, that's the first thing I was doing. Stupid pundit T-shirts started me up. Literally silly slogans, and I'm with stupid T-shirts. That's how it all started. And then I realized that there was, I could target markets outside. I didn't have to go outside in the cold, in the weathers and all weathers and stuff like that. I could do this online because there's a whole audience here that just love Alsatians. They adore them. There's 30 million on this one account. Let's get in there. Let's communicate with these people. Let's see how they talk. Let's get all the slang, the slogans, and yeah, that audience alone can pay your mortgage. That
But
one audience. Yeah.
but sitting out in the cold and in the weather and in the famous UK weather
It's learning. Yeah.
is an excellent place to start. So I
Yes.
recommend this across the board for people. I didn't come to this first because it's not been on my mind recently. But yeah, I think that if somebody is just getting started and they want to see how people are going to react to them, outside the algorithm, go in person. Go find a spot to go do this live and put on a live show.
Yeah.
Put your stuff out on a folding table, put it up on a big backdrop, and get people to see it whether they want to or not, and
Yeah.
see what that does. Because
Yeah.
that's the beginning, I think, of getting to see whether or not your stuff is going to hit.
Yeah. All the metal concerts I went to, there were nothing to do with the group. It was skulls. I'd do skull T-shirts, skulls with wings, angel skulls, and
Yeah.
put them on back of hoodies, back on this and that. And I've been banging them out to all the metalheads, and they soak that stuff up. They love it. Again, it's
Yeah.
about knowing your audience and adapting with it.
Yeah.
All.
What is their what's in the culture?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Don't go to an ACD concert and try and sell unicorn T-shirts. Although that would probably work today, honestly.
Yeah, there's a lot of irony.
I can yes, yeah, I could see My Little Pony selling at an ACDC concert all of a sudden. Just that, irony is a massive thing right now. Yeah, for sure. But one thing that I did suggest to the artist, the guy that was doing it, is Etsy still is okay. I fell out with Etsy, but that's my problem. With the way they're just corporate greed now, it's crazy. But with original pieces, I was trying to tell the guy to get some high quality, prints made, and put your original one up and have a price on it, and then have print prices and postcard versions of. So all of a sudden, this one piece you have, you can keep continually making money on that one piece by
That's right.
creating prints. And I said, Etsy's great for that. It really is, because you'll have your original piece there, and if somebody wants that and they're going to pay £2,000 for it, then let them pay £2,000 for it. That's great. But that you've got prints of the same size, but they're limited edition. You only got 50 of them and stuff like that, or maybe even less, and so on. And
yeah, my first print editions were of 10.
Yeah,
I worked it up to 100 before I stopped doing them.
Yeah. Yeah, it never worked out for me. People don't want to buy a sketch of it because mine's a sketch. Then I scan it. Then I do the rest in art. It didn't. It doesn't. Nobody wants my rough sketches of my angel demon sort of outlines. It doesn't work for me. But yeah, but as an artist, yeah, it's definitely. I think Etsy's available for people. It's quite affordable. I think it's an affordable market to get noticed. But having, you see, I know about the social media thing. Yeah, I do. But yeah, to having that Instagram, the X, and everything all to back it up, and have photographs of those things and your production works, it's something to where people will find you on Etsy, hopefully, and look at look for you. Oh, who are you? Who is this artist known as was? And look at it and go, all right, there it is. And yeah, so the social media presence is needed, I think, but Etsy is a great starting point, I feel, for the artist today, maybe, because I don't know any others that.
Yeah, Etsy is one of the only places that sales spots that has a discovery system built in. It can be tough to play the game with the whole search algorithm.
Yes.
I set up some listings on there to see if I get some bonus sales through Etsy, because I don't tell people where my Etsy is, but I do have one. So if they find it, I'll still capture the sale. And it's worked out all right.
Yeah.
I make a few bucks here and there, but I don't like, even as somebody who's like a known artist, I actually don't make a lot of money on Etsy.
No.
But it's not zero.
No. Okay.
And then the people I know that do stuff that is more widely searched, like things that are fan art or part of a culture, or like, if they have a favorite animal, like I have a friend who loves jellyfish. And so she's like the topmost, she comes up very high on search for jellyfish on Etsy.
Yeah.
And having specialization like that can potentially create like search hits that make it worthwhile to use Etsy for this exact purpose. But if you're just like, well, I have an idea for like a ballerina or whatever, it's like, yeah, no, it's not gonna turn into a sale.
No.
Even if it's the most beautiful painting of a ballerina ever, that's like not the game that is being played on Etsy.
Yeah, it's getting eyes on it, isn't it? Really. Yeah. You're better off doing a beautiful unicorn first, and then putting the ballerina on afterwards.
Yeah, or like a cute turtle sticker or something. Like there's all these different like things that people are searching for. I had a friend who started a Kickstarter the other day, and she didn't have a description of what the thing was, or an image. The thumbnail image didn't show what it was a comic and didn't show what the comic looked like, and then I was like, well, you need to actually show what thing is to people so they can know what they are getting. She's like, oh, okay. And then she went and changed it, and then she's like, should I launch this yet? And I wasn't looking at my DMs, and then she goes, I'm just gonna launch it. And it was like 11:30 at night. I'm like, you need people to back this thing in the first 12 hours. And everyone in the US is asleep.
Right.
Like, you do realize that these aren't just systems that magically make money. There's a customer on the other side, And it's like that's one of those things that I don't think, like, I think some people who are really in this game a lot understand very intuitively. And I think that's the thing that like doesn't really occur to people who don't do it so much, is that like this is not it feels just like numbers on a screen, and it's all just kind of peculiar and magical. But it really is, there are other people out there and other people who are making these decisions. Like if you have beaten the pavement before and you've seen these people face to face and sold face to face, it makes very clear sense. But if you've only ever seen sales as being numbers on a spreadsheet, it's really easy to just miss the fact that there's like realities of other people in the background that like they're on the other end of the transaction.
Yeah, it's time sensitive technically. Who knew uploading art was time sensitive? But yeah, I all my Hindu art, all that kind of stuff. I do all the gods. I do them all. And when again, time sensitive to India, to America, and everything's released at different times. Throughout my planners. So there's loads of planners online as well. You can see where it gives you peak times. It will give you like a little coloration of where it's really red, dark red, that's where you need to be posting, and then when it's pink, it's where it fades out for different countries and different time zones. It's very handy for people who are dealing with social media and posting.
Interesting.
Yeah, let me think. I'll do a quick. Let me think what I'm using. I'll promote them because there's a free bit. There's something called Metrical. It's a little planner that allows you to upload your social media up to for free. I think you do 50 a month, 50 posts a month for free on it, 100% free. No credit cards, no nothing like that. And I believe it's up to 2,000 posts for $18 a month. That's pretty fantastic. As in the sense you can literally plan up to 5 years ahead if you wanted to, with that sort of deal. But for free for 50 a month, that has those metrics on there telling you what the best times a day and which country where to post them. It's very, very it's amazing piece of amazing free tool. Metrical it's called. Metrical. Yeah, there's lots out there, different versions that do it, but they're really expensive. This one, let me think. In 8 years, this is the best one I've ever found, and yeah, I won't say my fingers on the button anymore, as it were, but on the pulse, on whatever it's called. But that's a cool little. If anybody wants to start posting on social media, post at certain times. Look at where the most popular. They'll come up in. I think it comes in black to grey for Twitter or X, where it's called now, pink for Instagram, and so on and so on. But yeah, you should guys check it out if you want to put your art up on social media, and plan it so it puts for the right time. So you don't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be posting it for the American audience or the English audience or whatever. It does it all for you.
They have a lot more scheduling tools built into social media these days than they used to.
There is, yeah. But I find that they're very clunky. But this one does it all at once for you. You know what I mean? It'll just you just get to bed and leave it to it. So that's my bit of advice there for people. But yeah,
and I think I'm just about done with my study. Just on time, coming in just 1 minute before the end of the session here.
Cool.
I feel like my internal clock has gotten pretty accurate. What's interesting about this is this reference back here. The streaks on the back of the wall are similar to the kind of vertical streaks that I have in my work. Maybe I'll exaggerate this a little bit.
Yeah, you need to, because it looks too whitewashed otherwise. Oh, it's been a pleasure. I'll let you wrap up.
Yeah,
and,
thanks so much. It's always good chatting with
you. Yeah, I'll catch you on the next one. Right. Later.
Yeah, so it was interesting keeping this black and white. It gave me a little bit more focus just on the details on it, because I wasn't needing to put in extra steps to be able to refine the color palette and poke around with making sure that the skin tones look good, and there's certain kinds of colors that attributes of color that we're particularly sensitive to, and so it adds that extra bit of difficulty to work in color. But then without it, there is this intense feeling of everything in a black and white image needs to be extra correct, because it's there's nothing to hide behind. Your values have to be right, because there's nothing in the colors that are going to allow you to escape people's judgment of the values. And so I am able to get so it's a give and a take, and I'm pretty happy with the result of it overall. We'll see how I feel about it tomorrow. There's always a little bit of lack of perspective that I get when it comes to seeing my art as it's being made and then getting to see what it looks like the next day. It's a very, very different experience. And then seeing it 15 years later, oh my God, I finally get to see what the art looks like after 15 years of having people, respond to it. Eventually I finally get to see it for myself, but quite lengthy process. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to break up this horizontal line a little bit. The horizontal line is very lazy. Definitely don't have a lot of value in it. So I'm just going to like mush it up a little bit, break it in spots intentionally. That way it doesn't capture too much attention for itself. And then I'm going to soften, I think, the lighting here a little bit with there's this gradient towards the bottom of this thing I think is quite meaningful. So I'll put a little bit of that in there. And then maybe a little bit in the background as well. A little soft brush to make sure that everything gradates in a very smooth way. So we have this mixture of these long gradating bits and then also these much grittier, finer bits. The two of them interplaying is what's going to create the overall effect of the piece. And then if we wanted to go even further with it, we could go and take the soft light and hit it pretty hard with soft light is really good at changing the general scale of a value without affecting the underlying contrast. So it would be good for maybe pumping up any kind of light effects that we want to create. And then I'm going to draw it back a little bit because it tends to feel like you're not doing enough. And then you look at it later and realize maybe you did a little too much. Okay. And that's my study for today. Thank you, everyone who joined me. Thanks, Ancient Chaos, for putting this on every single week, administrating the whole thing. Thanks, everyone who came on stage to ask me questions. You guys seem perfectly happy to just watch me chill and paint today, which is cool. But I always like helping, so don't be shy. If you want to find my own Discord where there's people making art every single day, hanging out in voice chat, go to huckleberry.art. You'll find links to the Discord along with some free resources I've got over there. And yeah, I will be back here next week. I'll see you on Tuesday, same time. Have a good one. Goodbye.